we appreciate you being here. And I'm going to open up with this question. And Ribble, you may want to stay on this wide shot here because I'd like to see a show of hands. Do you support, with a show of hands, the latest plan by the governor to use public dollars to support private education? If you're in favor of it, raise your hand. None of you are in favor of that idea. All right, so let's roll into some questions about that. Also, I want you to raise your hand if you have any private schools in the districts that you represent. Yes or no? So none of you have private schools. Okay. All right, so let's just go down the line again. What is your biggest concern when it comes to talk of school choice or vouchers?
Of course, the biggest thing for me is taking money that is funded for the public school system, putting in the private sector, especially without the accountability that comes upon all of us each day. So that's my number one thing, just taking money from the public sector, putting in the private sector.
And I'm going to ask that same question of all of you, so we'll just, and you can add whatever you want, but just as a follow-up question, the governor says, listen, I'm not taking that money away from the public education pot, I'm taking it from a different pot. What do you make of that rationale?
Well, if our kids go, then he is taking from us. You know, that money is going to follow the child. And it could put economic hardships in not just schools, but also in the communities. So that's as Dr. Parrott would say, that's not the foretold truth.
Okay.
So.
I'd like your perspective on that same thing.
I think similar to Bill. You know, when you start talking about taking money, and if there's another pot that we have this money stowed away in, why not put that into public schools? Why not feed all of our kids free lunches? And why not help with the attendance measures that we're held accountable for, but we don't really have control over? Why not put that money somewhere else to help public education? We are challenged with our curriculums, our pedagogy, our instruction, our engagement. Everything needs to be research-based. It needs to be proven successful. Why are we planning to adopt a program that hasn't proven to be successful in any other states that it's in? Why are we doing that? I feel like it's pretty irresponsible when you look at some of the other states. When you look at Arizona, it is fiscally killing them in education, but they continue to pour more money into it, and it shows that over 75% of the students enrolled in that program were already in private school. So you're not really reaching the kids that we say we're developing this program for. And that's a concern.
Okay, I appreciate you raising that because I want to talk more about accountability and also what we've seen in other places around the community. Let's get back to that basic question. What's wrong with using public dollars to fund private education?
Well, for us, there are a lot of issues with that. First of all, we are a Title I district, which means that we live obviously in a distressed county. And so if you pull the state funds plus the local funds that follows that kid to a private school that is maybe an hour away, you're pulling our kids out of our community. You're pulling our kids out of the place that we want them to grow and develop careers in. And so what you're doing is you're shipping our kids off somewhere else. And so what's that going to do? What's the end result of that going to be?
To a community that is already struggling to keep people.
We are already struggling.
Okay. Sir?
Yeah, I think fundamentally for me is, the idea of public money, taxpayer money ought to go to public schools. And, the idea that we can fund two school systems basically is the proposal, that we'll have two school systems that can be funded. And, and I find that hard to believe when we've not had a history in Tennessee of funding the one we have very well. I mean, even with the additional funds that's been added over the last decade, we're still in the bottom 10 in the country as far as funding education
per pupil.
Per pupil. And so to take that and say, well, we can now fund this dual system over here that as we've seen in other states is quickly going to go from $100 million the first year to, closer to $1 billion probably within 3 or 4 years when you open it to everybody. At some point, that's going to definitely impact the public schools. And, we have switched to a student-based funding model. And so to say that this is a separate pot of money and public schools won't be hurt, we are funded per kid. I mean, if I have a student, each kid has a dollar figure assigned to them, which, I hate to even say out loud that we talk about a kid being worth so much money, but that's our model that we have. And so if that student goes to a private school, they can say that's a different pot of money, but we still get less dollars because we were funded per student and based on the needs of that student. So I find that challenging. And the voucher amount is over $7,000 currently in Blount County, Alcoa, Maryville. We get $5,700 per kid from the state. And so 40% of the districts in the state don't even get the voucher amount to fund the kids we have, and we take all of them.
40%, and is that because of the reimagined BEP funding?
That's right. And so each county's, it's a level based on their ability to pay. And so 40% of the districts in the state get, Knox County gets $2,000 less than that voucher amount. We get about $1,300 less. And we're educating the students with disabilities, the English learners, all the kids who require significant amount of resources that the private schools are not going to take.
The reality is you could lose some of your top students as well. You could lose some of the bottom and some of the top in some of the concerns I've heard.
That's right. Yeah.
Your perspective.
I think that, first of all, I'm taken aback because I believe public schools can offer a student everything they need. We've done it for 100 years or 200 years. And we do know that there's some private schools out there, and the parents have chosen to take their students to that school. But here's the difference. When you talk about that student money and all those things, if we lose 50 students, those 50 students are not going to come out of one classroom. They're going to come out of 50 different classrooms. And so you still have that same amount of overhead and that money to do that. So what you're doing is we're going to have to decide, okay, do I close a small school like Bryceville that's got 120 students, not because they lost 10 students, but because we lost 50 students overall. And I think when you look at the governor's plan, he says we want to take these students out of a failing school and we want to give them an opportunity. Well, sitting around here, we don't have failing schools. And they set a program up to do that. They're giving those students $9,000 right now. We heard the Commissioner of Education say, the results are nothing to write home about. It's
about vouchers.
About vouchers and about what the students are what they grow in that. So I think everything along with that, when you listen to Ms. Stone, she talks about 75% of those students in these other states never went to public school. So that money's going to follow those students whatever. But it's just fundamentally, when I hear somebody say, well, public education can't give them that. Well, I disagree with that. We can give them that. We've proved that. I'm not sure there's any private schools out there that have a CTE program like we have. I'm not sure there's any of them out there that have all the other things that we have. And we use public dollars. And I think we're held to that accountability. With that, we take on that accountability. Sometimes we don't like it. Sometimes we have to live with it. But we live with it in that means. At private schools, they're not going to do that. They're not going to take that student that's hard, that disciplined student, or that student that's got that disability. In Anderson County, we stay every student every day, and that's what we do.
You have to take everyone.
Everyone.
Yes.
Your perspective on using public dollars to fund private education?
Tax dollars should go to public schools to fund public education because it affects the public. It doesn't just affect the students, it affects the entire community. Especially in a rural school district, we are the largest employer in our area, so it would have an economic impact on the communities as well. And when, just as Tim said, you close your smaller schools because you have to be able to fund the entire system, when that happens, you are closing schools, and when that happens, you close communities. So it's detrimental to the community and the school district and county.
You see it as an overall economic threat in addition to pulling students out of your district.
Absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Your perspective?
I look at it more as an ethical dilemma. I'm a huge supporter of public schools for a very personal reason. And my father was born into extreme poverty, and public education was what helped him break the cycle of poverty. And I am where I am sitting today because of public schools. And so I firmly believe that our public schools across the nation is the great equalizer, because we serve all children and we provide an individualized program for that child, not only academics. It's so much more than a multiple choice test that they take on one day. And we have put so much stock into that. But it is your social growth, it's your emotional growth, it is your love for your community, your tolerance that you're building for diversity and for others. And, I look at my father, and if vouchers would have been there for my father, they would not have been able to afford the gap. You're not going to go to a private school, a high-quality private school, for the amount of money that voucher is going to give. And the very highest needs kids aren't going to be able to afford that gap. And we have to advocate for that. So those kids, it's not about, they want to say that it's about parent choice. It is really not about parent choice. It's about schools choosing children.
Yes.
And there's a real ethical dilemma there. I have a very good friend right now that has a student that attends a local private school. And in that private school, you don't have to be a certified teacher. So the Algebra 1 teacher there is a brilliant man, brilliant engineer, no teacher training. So the child is not doing well in that school, and subsequently has gotten diagnosed with a processing disorder and a learning disability in math. Guess who's getting kicked out of that private school? Because they don't have to make the accommodations for this child. So this child then comes back to public school, which we will embrace, because we embrace all children. It's what we firmly believe. So for me, it is just that equity issue, that it's not really serving the kids that the politicians that are for this are saying that it serves. And frankly, there's not a grassroots effort in Tennessee for this to occur. This is an outside of state lobbyist and privatization groups that have come in and are pushing their agenda on our children. And unfortunately, I feel that it is unfortunate that it has fallen along political parties. You can be a Republican and still support public schools and be anti-voucher. You can be a Democrat and still support public. It's really not a partisan issue, and it's unfortunate that it's playing out that way, because our children should never be used as political pawns.
If I'm understanding you correctly, it sounds like you feel this is a top-down mandate. You're not hearing this groundswell from your communities to say,
No.
And what you're going to see, and I think that what the other states have done is testimony to that, we will not see a massive exodus of kids in public school. You're going to see children that already can afford to go to private school and are going to private school start taking the voucher money, which is going to ultimately hurt the public school children. And I don't ever want it to be an issue of it is private versus public. We are not in a war against private schools. There are lots of great private schools. There's lots of great home schools, and every one of us here believes in parental choice. It's not about us not believing in parental choice. It's just about the issue of keeping public dollars within public schools.
You brought up the accountability, and I'm going to go back down the line, but start with you this way. We'll go back. Accountability is something we have heard stressed by lawmakers for a long time when it comes to public schools, measuring teachers, measuring students. Where is the accountability, as you understand it, in the governor's plan to give more money to private schools?
The accountability, what we have been told, lies within the parents. And so the parents determine if they're happy, then the program is successful. But what I have pushed back on and said is that they want to believe in parent choice. So a parent can choose to go to private school, but if a parent chooses to stay in public school, they have to face third grade retention, fourth grade adequate growth, and they don't have a choice about what happens with their child if they choose public schools. But if they go to a private school, then as long as the parent is happy, that's the accountability at this point.
When you hear accountability talked about in public and private education, what comes to your mind?
A lot of what Kelly just said, it's a double standard. Private schools do not have to use all the state approved and mandated instructional materials. They can choose, select what they would like to add with that. They do not have to have the end-of-year testing, the 10-ready test. They do not have to adhere to the third grade retention rate. They do not have to worry about the fourth grade adequate growth and multiple other accountability measures. Whereas public schools are bombarded with accountability at every turn. Any money that is brought into a school district, whether it is local or federal, we're monitored. We have to account for that. That does not exist in a private school. So everybody wonders why there is such an exodus and a teacher shortage. It's because of this. We truly feel like it is an attack on public education, because no matter what we try to do in the public school system, it's just one more obstacle put in our way and something to just make it more difficult on teachers. They're doing all they can to get through a workday and meet the accountability measures that are put in place for them, and it's impossible.
I want each of you to weigh in on this accountability question.
And I think they have answered a lot of those questions. And, you know, accountability in an elementary school, they tell us how many minutes a student has to do PE every day. Mm-hmm. They tell us how many minutes they have math, how English. There's so much of that accountability that we have to deal with that has nothing to do with the test. But again, when you go to a private school, they can do whatever they want to. It's one thing, is the parent happy? If the parent happy, they're going to take their money there. If they're not, they're going to take it somewhere else. And I think that's the biggest deal.
Yeah. And I think, you know, accountability, like I said, is it's crazy right now. The amount of accountability that is put on is not only for the academic performance of the kids, but we're held accountable for their attendance, and we're judged, and that's part of our accountability report and our school designations, whether or not we get the good enough attendance rate, and you know, and that's somewhat out of our control. I mean, parent choice is parent choice, and if they choose not to push their kid to come to school, it's very hard for us to make that happen. And so, you know, just the idea that, you know, we hear from lawmakers all the time, you know, education is the biggest investment we have from taxpayer money, and we need to make sure that we're getting bang for our buck, and then to take millions. And the idea that they would then give that to private schools and then throw their hands up and say, no, we're not going to worry about the accountability for those taxpayer dollars. To me, if we have a state curriculum, we have state standards, the state has said this is what kids ought to be able to master at each grade. Wherever taxpayer money goes, they ought to be held to those standards and have to show those same measures.
Your perspective.
And even when you think about when they talk about the time, that's another thing. When they say every minute of our day is scheduled, it is literally every minute of our day. And it goes back to what Ms. Fields said about our teachers. Yes, they're leaving in droves. Well, there's a reason for that. You can talk to our teachers. They're like, well, I didn't get lunch today. I didn't get a bathroom break today. And that's the reality of what we live in. I mean, it really is. And the difference is, in a private school, and again, this is nothing against private schools, but they have the opportunity to attend school 5.5 hours, and then they may go do some sort of extracurricular activity, you know, that's completely outside of anything that we are allowed to do. And so how is that fair? And then obviously the letter grades and some of the things that have come down on us, which, you know, in my opinion is not valid, but you know, they have absolutely none of that they have to account for. They talked about attendance, test. They don't take anything that we do. And so they don't understand, like, I don't think parents truly understand what is happening in public ed. And again, it is the top down.
Well, and when you talk about accountability, you know, I'll piggyback off what Mike said a little bit with attendance. You know, when they say these vouchers are so that parents can have a choice from failing schools, well, that failure is by their accountability measures. So they're the ones telling us we're failing by their accountability measures, so let's give them money to go somewhere where there's no accountability measures. And again, to piggyback off what Mike said about attendance, we're held accountable for attendance. And I'll just give you a quick example that just happened this week that we see all the time, weekly, because part of the voucher can be used, vouchers also right now, it's in the bill, to be used for homeschool students as well. Yes. So as a public school, I think everybody here will agree with this, every year We get multiple students that leave our public schools to go to homeschool, where again, there's no accountability there. But they have the right to do that, okay? Which is totally fine, especially if, when we start getting on them about their attendance, when we start getting on them about their behavior, parent will pull them out, I'm gonna take them to homeschool. Okay, they will homeschool them for 2 years, then they decide, we're bringing them back. And when they come back, they haven't done anything for 2 years. But then we're gonna be held accountable for them.
So a
that
fourth
year at
grader,
school.
a fourth grader leaves and is homeschooled. They want to come back in 6th grade, but they're not ready for 6th grade. That's your experience.
Yes.
Yes. It happened to us this week. We had a family 2 years ago who pulled out 3 of their children. They had a child in 3 of my 4 schools. Now they're ready to bring them back, and they haven't been in school. They haven't opened a book, done anything since the day they left us. And they're getting ready to take a state assessment test. And we're going to be held accountable for that.
Yes, our teachers will be held accountable.
We will be held accountable for that child.
Accountability when it comes to you.
Well, it's kind of hard to go, everybody does
No,
a great job.
No, yeah.
You know, when it comes to teacher measures, our teachers have got to the point where what's next? What else can they put on us? Well, we don't know, because there's going to be another measure somewhere, I think, down the line.
Yes, there will be.
And it just seems like it's never ending. And you mentioned about teachers leaving. We chose this profession because we love what we do.
Yeah.
And people in our buildings love what they do.
They do.
But you're taking that love from them because of a test, because of a mandate, because of attendance, because of so much has been placed on them. Not saying what's placed on the pressure on the students also too, whether or not they're going to be eligible for the next grade. So those accountability measures that we are seeing, they're going to take the money that should be appropriated for the public sector, those same accountability measures need to be there as well. But as right now, we're not seeing that. She also mentioned homeschool. To me, that would be an abuse. I think we'll see, not all, a lot of people do a good job. But we do the same thing when a kid comes back, they've lost sometimes 2, maybe 3 years of school. And where do we catch that catching up point? And where is it? I think we'll see, for our community, we'll see more than that than a kid going to a private school.
They'll go to homeschool.
They'll go to
Yes.
homeschool.
Yes.
And take some money.
Yes.
Absolutely. So that's.
And you see some potential for bad actors in that.
I do, absolutely. And I hope not, but yeah, I do. I really do.
Let's talk about, you brought up what we've seen in other states, and I know all of you have been researching this, and because I'd like to go there. We say, well, I mean, I think the governor and supporters of this plan had said, hey, let's do this trial run in a couple of communities across the state. Well, we've already seen that trial run in other states. So let's talk about that. What have you seen in other areas that say maybe this isn't a good idea?
Well, I can't speak for the Nashville Metro or the Memphis schools. I can speak from what I've seen, what I've read. For example, they've used Arizona. You saw the failure success, failing that's been there. Why trial run when you're seeing it's not working? I just can't grasp that thought of why we're going down this road and this path.
And for people, you raised Arizona, but a lot of our viewers just haven't even looked at this. So what are you seeing in that state or other states?
Well, just sort of what I brought up before, you know, when you read the article, one of the first thing that comes up is how much more money they're having to spend now. You know, they start with X amount, and this is what they're putting into it. But now, over the last couple of years, they find that every year they have to put millions of more dollars into it. And I mean, where does that money come from? So as long, you know, and again, they're not seeing the results that the plan is not as they said it would be. It's not as they rolled out. For us, you know, when you look at our current State Department of Education and a lot of the programs that have been rolled out, all of them seem to be adapted from another state, not our own. And we tend to get folks from that state to push the initiatives that we want pushed. Our TISA, you know, our new funding formula, straight out of Texas, you know, vouchers. really kind of straight out of Texas. And I have not had a personal call or a personal conversation with our new Commissioner of Education, but again, has never been in public education.
Is not qualified to teach in this state.
Is not qualified to teach. Well, she is in a program currently. But no.
We're catching her up.
We're catching her up. We're catching her
It's not
up.
going to be on.
We're catching her up. And honestly, maybe this is my opinion, but when you look at when they actually try to speak with her, she doesn't want to speak in public, nor do they want her to speak to people, because she cannot speak about public education.
Your confidence level in her is low.
Yes.
She can't speak about the mandates that she's rolling out to us. She can't speak to them because she doesn't understand them. That's disturbing.
Have you seen things that concern you from other places in the trials of vouchers?
Yes, obviously in other states that have tried this. For example, in one state, they have 41% have completely failed already, and it has cost that state a ton of money. So 41% of these that I would call pop-up schools, because that's really what's going to happen in rural communities. You're just going to have small pop-up schools that will last 2 or 3 years, and then they won't be able to maintain, and then they'll go away. And then we're left with the kids that didn't get the education.
I think the speaker spoke about Florida being a good place to look, and that it was a shining example of where vouchers did work, have worked.
And I think the detail of what does it mean to say it works, because that's I would disagree with that. I mean, when we keep hearing from legislators, well, just hang on, don't overreact because the bill hasn't been released yet. I don't think it matters, because we know what the end game is. I mean, that's the thing we see from other states, and has been pointed out. This is a very outside group influenced legislation that we're being pushed towards, and it's in a lot of states nationwide. And so we know the end game is no income limits, no limit on how many people can take vouchers, open to all. And so whatever we start with, they can put anything in the bill for next year, and it may be limited to 20,000 kids, and it may have some income limits. We know that's not the end. It starts in every state that we've seen. It started as it started in Tennessee with students with disabilities. Open vouchers after students with disabilities, certain disabilities. We have that. Then put it in your inner city urban schools, Nashville, Memphis. We're following the game plan. And so next is to get it statewide with a certain number, and then open it up to everybody. Arizona, is the latest to do that. Florida's been there longer. Indiana, happy to see that South Dakota just defeated it in the House in their first subcommittee meeting. That Texas just defeated it in this past legislative session. So we have hope. It's going to take the rural legislators and people looking at the evidence and not just listening to these outside groups. In Arizona, as we already pointed out, 80% of the kids who took the voucher were already in private school, and the average cost of tuition in Arizona went up by the voucher amount. So you're not making it any more accessible, because that just makes sense. Business supply and demand. If the private schools we know here, Webb, Catholic, CAK, all can raise their tuition $7,000 if that's the voucher amount, because you'll serve the exact same kids, but now you have this taxpayer money. So that's what's happened. That's what's happened in Florida is no different. What's happened in Florida, who's attending vouchers, and is the exact same as what's happened in Arizona. I think the big thing though is the studies that have been done on the success of the kids. And it's, there's some mixed results, but overwhelmingly those studies show that there's been little to no improvement. Either they stay the same or they actually do worse than their peers, comparable peers, do in their public schools. And if that's what we're basing it on, are we helping kids? We're not. The evidence is not there.
Yeah. One of the things that if you look at the voucher program in Tennessee and you have a child that has a special need, a disability, you have to sign a paper really and truly giving up the right to a public education or to have somebody work with that disability to take that voucher. Because what it is, they don't want, the private schools don't want to have to deal with that. They don't want to come under due process, or they don't want to have to hire somebody outside to come in and to help that student meet their full needs. So right off the bat, that student's going, when they come to public education, we take them off. And I think that's a real disservice. When you look at how the state, the track record, the state started taking over schools. I think some of them's been 15, 20 years ago. They're no better now than they were when the state took them over. They can't even keep a superintendent. The last one lasted 5 months. So how can we trust them to say, hey, this is going to be a good program? Because what happens if it goes out here and it's a bust, and they say, the state says, well, we can't do vouchers anymore, and we've closed 3 schools in Anderson County, and now we get 2,200 more students back. We have to figure out a way to take them. We have to figure out a way to put them in that school. Every student that walks through the door, if they're in our zip code, we take them. So I think that if the governor really and truly, and I don't believe what he says, but if he really and truly believes that he's going to help these students that are in failing schools, then the program he already has in place takes care of that. It's in Memphis, it's in Nashville, it's down in Chattanooga. If you want to expand it to those other failing schools and those systems, let's figure out if that works. But the problem, that's not what it's about. It's about those friends of his and all these outside organizations, these private schools. They see an extra $7,000. I've got 1,000 kids in here. That's extra $7,000 per kid that I'm going to get from public money now that I didn't have last year. So that's my concern. Let's even the playing field.
Anything from outside the state? We've talked a lot about it, but anything else you'd add from places you see as a cautionary tale?
Yes, research and studies, and the data shows that school systems in Washington, D.C., Milwaukee, and Louisiana have said that students would have scored better if they had remained in public schools as opposed to private schools. And the latest results have shown that in Louisiana, students have scored worse now with vouchers than they did as a result of Hurricane Katrina or COVID-19.
Anything you'd add to that?
I'm concerned about just the misuse of funds as well. In other states, there has been a gross amount of misuse of funds because that voucher is not going to go directly to the private school. That voucher goes straight to the parent. And it can be used for a wide variety of things, including private school, but also transportation, instructional supplies, field trips, and some other things. And other states have had massive reports where expensive golf clubs have been bought, expensive ski trips have happened, all in the name of an educational field trip, which we know is not the intent of the program. So I worry about that. The other thing is just, I go back to the efficacy piece. You know, when this was first rolled out, it was rolled out in Metro Nashville and Shelby County as a pilot program. And we were told we want to see if it works before we expand it statewide. And then, of course, it got held up in the courts. But you've got the Commissioner of Education herself that in a Senate hearing committee, who is pro-voucher, look at them and say, the results of our Tennessee kids are nothing to write home about. And so if you've got a commissioner that's pushing this and is a firm believer in it, but she herself is saying that the data is not any better, this is a gross misuse of funds to spend millions and millions of dollars, whether it's taking money from public ed or not. It's just a misuse of funds until they can prove that it is an efficacious program.
I only have a couple more questions, but one involves you all in talking to your local lawmakers. Raise your hand if you are having a conversation with your state legislator about this. All of you are working hard to say this isn't a good idea. How many of you, by a show of hands, feel like the horse has left the barn when it comes to the governor and there's no putting it back in?
Yes. And unfortunately, our representatives are feeling that pressure. They're feeling the pressure of holding party lines and doing what the governor wants versus serving constituents. And so that bottom line is going to be how it plays out. Who has the ethical responsibility to serve constituents versus a political agenda?
I don't want to take up too much more of your time because you've been generous with it, and I think we've had an enlightening conversation. Is there something that I should have asked you that I haven't that you think is important to point out about where this goes from here? Any of you?
One thing I would like to say, in public education, we say our business is kids. Our business is not business, and that's what private schools are. It is a business. It is to generate money. And we're in trouble when we lose focus of our students. They are our number one priority. And anyone who loses sight of that has lost the focus of education. And, you know, public education is the cornerstone of our democracy.
One thing I want to get your reaction to is we've heard in this debate, competition is good. It will make our public schools better. What's your reaction to that?
We're not scared of competition. I'll put Clinton City Schools up against any district, but the playing field has to be equal, and it's just not.
It's not.
It's not. Like you said, it serves two different purposes. We serve schools. So, you know, that is just, to me, smoke screens.
And I would say the same thing. I mean, I'll think any of our districts up against any private school. I think competition looks a little different if we're competing against homeschool. Because if you dangle $7,000, I'm a parent of 3, I can take $21,000 and have a lot less stress, take my kids home, not worry about behavior, not worry about attendance. That's hard to compete with. That one, even in great school systems that do a great job, I think our number of homeschool kids, and again, other states, that's going to go through the roof. And I worry about that. I mean, I think just, you know, the workforce, we talked a lot about workforce development and preparing kids for success. The governor, you know, one of the great programs we've had under Governor Lee was his Innovative School Grant money, which put millions of dollars just into career technical education, allowed all of us to really up our game in preparing kids for jobs that are available in our communities. And so we have CTE programs. We're pouring tons of money into that in this state. That's absent. I mean, as it was already pointed out, you know, private schools, high school private schools are college prep. I mean, that's their focus, is college preparation, all of them. You know, there's little to no CTE programming. And this is to the point, even in the Blount County Chamber of Commerce, they came out as an organization and voted to oppose this legislation from a workforce development standpoint. They're fearful that the development's not going to be there for the jobs in Blount County if we have widespread vouchers.
So if I'm hearing you right, if you're representing a rural district like you are, the governor is a big fan of investing in rural communities. Don't do vouchers, take that money and invest in more CTE programs.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or I feel like too, you know, again, I think all of us sitting here and a lot of us, a lot of our colleagues, we serve great school systems. We serve great teachers and paras and custodians and staff, and we serve great communities and kids. And it bothers me because, like Kelly said, I'm a huge fan of public schools. I'm a result of that. My family was a result of that. But I feel like our teachers are getting slapped around a little bit right now, and so I feel like not even in our area, but when we talk about the schools that they want to talk about failing, like Memphis, Shelby County, you know, those teachers, I would dare say, and I haven't been in them, but I would dare say they face some of the same issues we do, only at a much greater extent. And so I would challenge them, and I have challenged some of our representatives. I've said this to them. What have you really looked at to see why they're failing? Have you looked at their attendance rate? Because you've held them accountable for that, but you haven't given them any resources to take care of it. Have you looked at their discipline issues? And have you looked at really the core problem of both of those things that I think are a true result of a failing school? You can't teach a child that's not there consistently. You can't teach children when there's complete disruption in a classroom because of misbehavior of children. Both of those are apparent. And if we will take this money that we have, put into those failing schools, hold parents accountable for their child's attendance. Maybe they don't receive federal dollars if their child doesn't come to school. Have them have some skin in the game. But instead, we're telling these teachers they're failing when they're really busting their tail every day in classrooms with kids that many of them wouldn't last 10 minutes in.
That's right.
So I feel like, we have to stand up for our teachers right now who are seeing some things that most of these people who are making these judgment calls wouldn't last.
My last question, unless John or Olivia has a question, I just want to give each of you 30 seconds. And if Governor Lee is sitting in the seat that I'm in, what do you say to him?
You've done some great things for our state. You've done some great things for, say, with the CTE programs. This is not great. There's no research that says it is. There's no way that you can make us more successful. Give us what we need to not only to do better, but to become great. And I think you'll see the fire these people have in them and the passion they have. That's because they love what they do, and we all do. And it's unique, but you give us the resources we need that we can be more successful than what we are.
If Governor Lee's sitting in front of me, I'm inviting him to come and spend the day with me in my building and walk through my classrooms, maybe even teach a class, and see what's going on. I invite you to do that so that you really see the people that you're going to affect and that you really see the students that you're going to affect. Walk into my CDC classroom with me and see the kids you're going to affect, and do the right thing for us. Do the right thing. That's what you were elected to do. Let's see where you are with it.
As for us, again, just like Mr. Hall said, he's done a lot of good things for law enforcement. He's done a lot of good things for workforce, things like that. This is not good in public ed, okay? And I say that wholeheartedly because I know what we do day in and day out. Day in and day out. And if he would truly look at his letter grades, and I probably shouldn't throw these statistics out, but economically disadvantaged is another thing that affects our schools. If you look at the A schools, and we're thankful we have A schools, but they have 18% economically disadvantaged percentages, okay? And the people with 54% or more, like some of us sitting here, they're F schools. And there's a true correlation behind that. Poverty is very difficult. It just is. And when they say that public schools are fully funded, come sit and talk on the phone with a parent that says, I need a nurse in my kid's school, and we don't have the money to pay for it. So come and sit with us in the trenches. So.
I think I had an opportunity to speak to the governor. I would just plead with him not to play games with their kids, not to play politics with their kids. They're too valuable. And what we need to do is invest in the school system that we have, the public school system, make it the best in the country, invest into it in a way that gives us a chance to meet the needs of our kids, to meet the behavior and all needs. When we talk about academics, we're talking about the social, emotional, behavioral, all needs that our kids have. There are a lot. There's a tremendous amount of needs, and it takes a ton of resources and a ton of people to make that happen. And we just don't need to play games. It's not about, well, let's wait and see what the bill says. I would say, there's some people that are in a camp, well, I'm going to wait and see if there's accountability, then I might be okay with vouchers. I'm going to wait and see if he makes the private schools take all kids, then I might be okay. I'm neither of those. And none of us are either of those.
No.
We're no. It's just no, period. Public dollars ought to stay with public schools, and let's make our public schools great.
Yes. I think that Governor Lee's been in our schools. He's seen what we did. And I think to say that the students in Anderson County are being shortchanged because we don't have vouchers is a total misrepresentation.
Yeah.
And I think that if there's something out there that our students need, we're going to do our best to get that. Our county commissioners, our school board members they really and truly work every day to make sure that our students have what they need. But it's about every student every day. And I think for him to come out and say, if he would just come out and say, hey, listen, it's not about what we're going to do for these economically disadvantaged kids. It's about what I'm going to do for my buddies that their kids are already going to private schools, and I'm going to give them some more money. I'm going to set this big program up that we can spend millions of dollars on somebody running it for us. We can put a lot more money out into the public instead into the private sector, and that's what it's about. Just tell us the truth. If you got a problem with that, it's a whole lot easier to stand up when you're telling the truth.
I would say, please look beyond the classroom and the school. Look at the homes that these children in rural school districts are living in. Do you want them to stay in a homeschooled environment like that? Would you not rather they come to a school where they can have a hot breakfast, a hot lunch, a snack? They can be with people who are going to meet their needs. They're going to provide them the resources they need, whether they're social, emotional, or academic. You can't take just a little snapshot of a student and think that you are providing them with what they need.
You get the last word to the governor.
Bring it home, Kelly.
Yeah, she can take care of it.
I would just say engage. That is not what we have seen from Governor Lee. And I agree with many of his policies. I just happen to greatly disagree with this one. You know, when he first became governor, he was the only governor candidate that did not come to see director of schools. He did not come to our group to introduce himself.
Yep.
He has really not engaged in public education except on the outskirts. I don't think any of us have had a personal conversation with him about the challenges that we have and what goes on in the school. I do remember the first time he spoke to us, he told of a story when he was a big brother to somebody in an inner city and got them either in a charter school or private school, and how that changed his trajectory. And I feel like he uses that one success story and has just exaggerated it to help his cause. And, you know, we hear success stories every single day in public ed. Just engage with us and learn them.
And we know anecdotes aren't reality.
Anecdotes aren't reality. Right. And Mike Winstead is we call him our resident data statistician. And he's taught all of us way more than we would ever know about data. And he can say, tweak the data till it says what you want to say. And I really feel like over the past few years, that's what Governor Lee has done. He has tweaked the data to say what he wants it to say about public education. Our letter grades, Mike Winstead served on the committee back in 2017 when the formula was created. We had a formula. There were too many A's. And so all of a sudden we're told by the commissioner in August that we're redoing the formula because we needed to redo the formula to set the stage for the narrative that we need to set about public education. Public education is not failing kids. We cannot put all of our stock in a single multiple choice test given by a 9-year-old in 3rd grade to determine. The test was never intended to determine if a child is reading on grade level. In fact, an ELA test is 40% grammar and writing. And we're letting that determine a mandatory retention. But there again, that law was created and pushed through without ever having any conversations with educators and directors of schools. So there's just a very, very strong disconnect. And I feel like if he would open up his heart and learn a little bit more about the mission work that we do and the successes and miracles that happen every single day, you couldn't help but to fight for every kid, because vouchers don't serve all children. It is about school's choice. And we should never, never put our kids in that position.
We are grateful that all of you took some time to talk to us and give us your perspective. We value it greatly. We appreciate what you do in your districts every single day. As a son of educators, I so appreciate the hard work that you're doing and what you're doing that is never seen. I know it happens every day. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.